Last time, we covered the original 3 builds of Banjo Kazooie, starting as a dream project by Rare's co-founder Tim Stamper and designer/director Greg Mayles to make a SNES 2D RPG called Dream, featuring a protagonist that went by the name of Edson in a fantasy setting before being moved to the Nintendo 64, or more specifically, the 64 disk drive, with the game's ideas and scope expanding, as such changing more to a pirate-based story featuring Edson still, before seeing a build of Conker's Quest, whereby to the team it looked like a more proper game featuring an animal protagonist and being a platformer at that, thus leading the team to change Edson out for a new animal bear protagonist by the name of Banjo and making it a platformer, before rebooting it once more to a 2.5D platformer entirely, with a new title of Kazoo, one that had a small resemblance to Crash Bandicoot, and in an attempt to match Mario's athletics, led Banjo to get a partner bird character to expand upon his movesets greatly, a bird at that time by the name of Tweeter. However, soon Nintendo had the team take a close look at Super Mario 64, inspiring the game's director Greg Mayles to want to start over, as he felt that 2.5D games were just too outdated, and the obvious direction was to go in a fully 3D route like Super Mario 64 did. And so now, the game was being rebooted once more on the path to its final incarnation. And so through starting the process of making new levels in an early state, beta enemies, and creating the game's beloved cast by taking much inspiration from the past, today on part 2, we shall explore the history and beta unused content of Banjo Kazooie. If you enjoy this video, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button too, to further support us and keep creating new videos. It was now early March 1997, and with a staff of just 10 people to start, they had in just 1 week of development, shifted from the 2.5D iteration to a fully 3D one. In that time span, they had decided to change the game's title, being already called Kazoo. It was kind of a meaningless title, and referred to a musical instrument, much as Banjo's name did, as well as the other bear, Piccolo. Meanwhile, the bird Tweeter lacked a proper name. Tweeter was designed as a rather annoying bird, with a sharp tongue and even defecating in Banjo's backpack. Meanwhile, the Kazoo was an annoying sounding instrument, and thus the name and the bird were a match made in hell. So it was decided that the bird shall take the title's name, being renamed to Kazoo. Being that both Banjo and Kazoo were 2 halves of a character, the game now brought in Banjo's name too, to share with Kazoo's name as Banjo Kazoo. And so the team modified the graphical engine, which was used to pull polygons from a base to build stages, to function more as a common polygonal stage building tool to build these fully 3D levels. And so, being that this was the team's first true foray into working on a 3D platformer, they made a test map. This test map, like many others, were made with simple cubes, and it was full of slopes at different heights. As a result, it was a good spot to test the game's mechanics in this new 3D engine, including the need of Kazoo to run up slopes while Banjo would slip down. But shortly after, they made another test level, not one with simple cubes like this one, but one that actually looked and felt like a level, resembling that of a Mesoamerican temple, complete with gates, bridges, slopes, blocks, while also being several stories high. The level even featured gargoyle statues, which designer Ed Bryan based on the trolls from the very original version of Dream on the SNES. And so this made a perfect place to test and refine Banjo and Kazooie's moveset in the transition from the 2.5D build here. While the main moves were kept, the refinement process led to moves such as Feather Flap's Descent being severely shortened. Meanwhile, new moves such as a backflip were implemented, as well as a new Shock Spring special jump for Kazoo to utilize and jump, let alone testing flight in full 3D. While the camera was a major hurdle for them to figure out, with the characters constantly moving in 3D space, seeing the duo function so well in this one map gave the team the major confidence boost they needed. As lead engineer Paul McKayick would say, "We suddenly had impetus, there was direction, everyone was committed, and so came time to actually build the proper game." With new inspiration and confidence, The plans to make the world of Banjo and Kazoo were being made with the idea of being believable in a fantastical way, and so much brainstorming took place on as many locations as they could think of. This led to them coming up with ideas for at least 16 worlds. So shortly after, the first levels of the game were now in development, starting with Spiral Mountain. Initially, the idea of this mountain that would spiral upwards was that it was man-made with these bricks in place, but down the road was more of a natural formation. But as well, various enemies of stronger variety were placed here, including 2 of the bull enemies who were back from the Kazoo build, as well as a new gorilla enemy called Conga. As these were definitely enemies who were on the much tougher side, these eventually were moved to another level later in development. And so coming later to March 1997, the next level would be the beach level, their third take at making one, and this one quite resembling that of the 2.5D iteration, as that was even being made as a more open-ended level initially too. With this one being even more open-ended now, this was where these new pads were introduced that Kazoo can utilize to fly. The pads originally were entirely blue with a talon print, but soon changed to have red feathers, better resembling the action of flight for a red Kazoo. The level itself, while heavily resembling the concept art, had several changes. The starting platform initially being more an L shape before straightened out. The sandcastle could be drained with a simple beak bomb, changed to having it plugged up through a character called Lakey the Bucket. The archway in the middle has a simple bridge connecting both sides, the bridge on a rock pier being made of wood before being changed to brick. And this whole back area initially required one to scale the mountain in a very dangerous feat to reach the pools at the top. Eventually, this was changed to simple stairs to avoid the constant threat of being shark food. As well, during the stage, the rope bridge was one that Banjo was able to walk up by himself, but was soon changed to require Kazoo to run up. Now the level's music track initially was a much slower and less energetic song here. But Grant Kirkhope eventually felt it just didn't feel right, and so he completely rewrote the song. Simultaneously, they were also making a level that would involve a giant shark, or as initially called, whale. This was a lush pond-like level in an enclosed mountain involving this organic beast called Clanker, but this level soon enough started seeing much changes whereby it started going completely mechanical, the cavern itself being now covered entirely in mechanical tubes and tiling vents, with all the lushness now gone. Not so much a pond anymore, but more cavern, and thus now renamed after the beast as Clanker's Cavern, which Clanker himself wasn't safe from being converted either, becoming a completely artificial shark. Roughly by mid-April, work was well underway on the jungle level. More or less was the team's fourth foray, introducing their default forested location as an early level, starting out rather lush and green like any other jungle level. Eventually the team decided that it was to stop being a jungle and more a mountain. Thus, much of its lush green textures became grayer and brown to reflect this. In fact, the theme for this level had a more jungle vibe to it initially, complete with animal sounds. But completely rewritten upon becoming a mountain. The level, of course, contained the bull enemy, albeit only one as opposed to the 4 on Spiral Mountain, and only one variety at that, with the other cut altogether. The gorilla now sat at the top of a tree, which interestingly enough, Conga here had a white shirt originally, but was swapped to a red one. Along with these, the level had another enemy, this being a masked enemy, which they hadn't even animated at first, as he was just popped into the level in a T-pose. The mask, in fact, had a resemblance more to a tribal mask, as the jungle area was at this point resembling more a tribal setting, which included a central shaman character for this level, one that would be a friendly character who would transform the duo using magic. This character may have even been inspired by the old wizard character that was planned for Kazoo, who would do the same kind of transformations for Banjo. Designer Ed Bryan, who already was the creator of the collectible characters the Jinjo, who was named by the team as that, as it was simply a joke towards the fact that its creator was a ginger, decided to create the shaman using the model of the Jinjo, with the addition of a skull mask and feathers for that tribal appearance. Initially, he had green skin, which only became greener to then a purple one before getting pink skin, soon to be given the proper or improper name of Mumbo Jumbo. As he was the central character to the level, and they were going for a mountain aesthetic now, the level was renamed to Mumbo's Mountain. This to the point of his hut even being changed to be a sturdy structure resembling his mask. Meanwhile, the other tribal enemies were changed to becoming the Grublin enemies, a means as to not confuse Mumbo Jumbo as an enemy due to their uncanny resemblance. And as development continued, another mountainous level was also being built called Bubblegloop Swamp, taking place on a mountain that was full of swamp water, which the duo would have to scale between two levels of. An odd mishmash really, which may have led to the decision to change the mountain into a full-blown forested swamp. This change led to the mountains being changed to extra large trees all over the place as barriers. Even the wooden bridge was being changed to tree branches, as well as the evening sky becoming a pitch black night sky too, to set in that swamp mood further, fulfilling their mastery of building swamps that they were well known for since Donkey Kong Country. In many ways, both Mumbo's Mountain and Bubblegloop Swamp had swap themes. And so now being late April, proper logos for the new Banjo Kazooie were being drafted, with them now making proper headway into development, having both Banjo and Kazooie's face in a very unsettling appearance in between their names. Also within the same time frame, in late April, a snow level was also being drafted called Freezeezy Peak. A design that they made that very much stayed the course to the end, only major difference being that the snowman they drew was a lot more portly while also sporting arms. But at the same time, the water wasn't yet determined on how deep it should be or if it was even swimmable yet. As a result, underwater themes were made for it. One for the general area, and one for within the cave. Eventually it was determined that the water would hurt you, so therefore you shouldn't be swimming in it in the first place, and not even deep enough to play the underwater music. Let alone Grant Kirkhope had also made a slower, less energetic rendition of the Freezeezy Peak theme. Before giving that strong energy down the road. To finally something more in between. This was followed by a horror-based level in May 1997, which was modeled very closely to its concept art. Only change came about scaling the roof of the shed, which was originally going to be done with a stack of crates, but changed to a simple chalk jump pad. Meanwhile, Ed Bryan was once again reaching back to the Project Dream days, whereby much like the test level, he decided to design the ghost enemies after the trolls that appeared in the N64 version of the game, as well as even including a portrait of the original villain, Captain Blackeye, in the level as a little Easter egg. Now while Banjo Kazooie and Mumbo Jumbo were brought into the fold as characters, another character from the days of Kazoo was being brought over too, a female bear player by the name of Piccolo. Piccolo was already a character evolved from Edson's girlfriend Madeline, was about to see another major change. This time, Piccolo was being shrunk down to a more child-sized bear to better match Banjo as his little sister. Now it should be noted that Piccolo was never designated as Banjo's girlfriend. This is a popular belief due to the fact that Nintendo Power falsely claimed this, but Greg Mayles has come out personally to state the truth in that she was never Banjo's girlfriend. But of course, what was needed most was an idea for a villain. With the move from Kazoo to Banjo Kazooie, the story was altogether thrown out too, and starting over. As a result, Captain Blackeye and his pirates were not to be part of the story anymore. Initially, the team wanted to bring back the giant that was being penned as the major villain of Dream, with a hub world that would take place within a giant castle, whereby one would access each of these levels via a painting one would construct using collectible jiggies from each level. However, he was scrapped shortly after, and so taking inspiration from the witch Grotbags from the British television show Emu's All-Live Pink Windmill Show, and the Wicked Witch of the West from The Wizard of Oz, the idea of a witch was being conceived. The team already had a witch enemy in the works during the 2.5D days of development who would turn Banjo into a frog. Taking that initial idea together with the wisecracking and bitter personality of the inspirations made the villain Gruntilda, which as such led that castle they wished to make for the giant to become more of a sprawling and varied witch's lair. Cauldrons all over, fitting of a witch's lair, to be used by Banjo to jump from one area to another with how large it was. The warp cauldron itself originally was designed to have a meaner look, complete with fangs, before given its friendly appearance. And the whole premise with Gruntilda was that she'd kidnap Piccolo in order to use her to regain her youth, leading to Banjo, together with Kazoo, having to go and rescue her. In fact, plans even existed for an early cutscene of Gruntilda smoking a pipe and spying on Piccolo through her laptop, a scene that would never get into the game. But with the creation of these characters came the need to finally voice them. Initially, the game was set to also have voice acting, much as the previous iterations all had, and Banjo even already had a recorded voice from those days on Project Dream.
A dog! I could hear a dog down there. I better go and see if he's alright.
But ever since the inclusion of characters like Kazoo and Gruntilda, the banter of the game had gotten very heavy. Whether it be Kazoo's sharp tongue going off or Gruntilda's insults, it was too many lines to record and would only make development go on for even longer, despite already being in development for 2 years. So it was decided to drop voice acting and pursue more the stylings of comedic grunts. Head programmer Chris Sutherland, who already had voiced Edson and later Banjo when introduced, made a simple but soon-to-be iconic grunt for Banjo. Kazoo, being both a girl and a bird, needed her own voice that was very distinct. Now Kazoo wasn't based on any real bird, but rather a race they made up called the Breagles. Chris Sutherland, who also was to voice her, simply used the name of the race to scream Outside of Banjo, the other characters were being voiced by other Rareware staff with various grunts. Mumbo Jumbo, however, was a special case. Composer Grant Kirkhope, who was to voice him, had to give him a very distinct voice. Being that they wanted a rather stereotypical tribal-sounding voice for him, Kirkhope decided to record literally a bunch of Mumbo Jumbo and chopped it up to give it distinct lines. Lines like are made up from the line, "Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough." Is based on Omi Knackers, which Kirkhope himself would say when he visited a doctor to have his groin examined, which knackers is a British slang for testicles. This went as far as to make a special rain dance song for Mumbo Jumbo using these, but went unused. Have a listen. But aside from the voices, the game's music production by Kirkhope had been well underway since he rebooted with Kazoo, having this time taken much influence from Danny Elfman. After listening to his score on Beetlejuice, to make a mix of both comedic yet dark chords in order to produce the soundtrack of the game. In fact, was directly influenced from Elfman's score on 1989's Batman, but overall, the game had a very musical touch to it, ever since the very beginning in fact, when they had brought over Donkey Kong Country's composer David Wise, which was followed by Kirk Hope for his ability to make remixes of tracks. While the bear was named Banjo, this was a pure coincidence, which influenced the team to just give everything a more musical touch. Banjo's sister Piccolo, Kazoo, and even the addition of musical notes one collects 100 of in every level. As well, they had plans for making an intro to the game where the game's cast would sing their roles. Of course, with the idea of voice lines removed, the cast was now down to just using their instruments instead. Once again, being that this was a game with a heavy musical influence since its inception, they had, through motion capture, captured various instruments being played to be used for the opening of the N64 version of Project Dream in fact, which they wanted to use here again. However, in the end, they opted to just hand animate everyone's animations, except for Banjo's, as they really liked how the motion capture actor moved his hips as he played the banjo. As a result, the opening was being constructed with a simple background, but eventually changed to a more three-dimensional forest, complete with a waterfall. With the game coming so far, and having a solid structure after 2 years of work, along with the team growing to 15 members and working 80-hour work weeks, Rare was ready to show off Banjo Kazooie at the June E3 1997. But one problem suddenly showed: trademark issues, with a few names in fact. In this case, Kazoo was trademarked already. A strange trademark, as it was simply the name of a musical instrument, but alas, simply wasn't usable. Instead of the poor bird getting another name change yet again, they simply added an I and an E at the end of Kazoo to make Kazooie, and thus avoided the trademark ordeal. As such, the title of the game was changed for one last time to Banjo Kazooie, with a hyphen even added between the names to further avoid the trademark issues. On top of that, Piccolo was also another trademark issue herself, possibly because of a certain other popular anime having a character of the same name. Being that she tooted a Piccolo flute, it was simple to rename her as Tooty, and thus a crisis was averted, and the team could calmly trek forward to E3. Next time, on the final part, the game is finally being shown off at E3, where the world gets its first true look in the first steps to build hype for this game. And with newfound confidence, the development team starts to build several new levels, a multiplayer mode, another special mode, and even the idea of a stop and swap system for at least 6 future Rare games. But trouble soon hits when they realize that time is short, and now have to cut out many of their plans and consolidate to make and release the game by June 1997. And so in order to catch this final part, make sure to hit the subscribe button, for I'll plan to be back for more Banjo Kazooie and other games gaming history and cut content soon. Hit the like button, comment below, and if you would have preferred any of the earlier iterations of these levels. So everyone, thank you for watching!